historically, with a full Lightning node, particularly if you want to share it or connect it to e-commerce, you have to do all that traditional server type stuff. Like you have to have a domain. You have to point that domain to a reverse proxy for SSL. If that node's in your home, you have to have a configuration in your firewall and your router and all these sort of things. That's some pretty complicated setup. That's not a casual setup. Things like the SSL certificate, the static IP4 address, actually, that's something else you would need with your firewall, or you have to put it in a VPS. Those are things that have been worked around with Tor, which, if you followed my post, I would never advocate anybody running Tor. All it does is make your Lightning node unreliable, because you're bouncing all that traffic potentially all over the globe. So that makes it slow, because there's multiple hops involved. So you could be going from the US to India to Europe and back again before the packet even gets there. And if there's a hiccup anywhere along the way, the packet just doesn't make it, doesn't work. So anybody that's tried to run like a Lightning node for business behind Tor has had to give up on that. That is just not going to work. Nostr, on the other hand, is literally just a web server that anybody can run a relay. It takes that's very trivial to set up. You don't even need the SSL piece because it's encrypted already with the messages. So this Lightning node, it connects to a relay. It's our relay by default. It could be your own, could be your buddy's. But you don't have to trust that relay at all because all the comms are encrypted and all the comms are signed, right? So when you put an N profile, a Nostr profile, that encodes a public key and a relay. And that is how your wallet can talk to your node. And your node never needed any of that fancy setup. You didn't need to have an SSL domain or a firewall or any of that thing because it's just punching out to the relay. And because it's just a web server, there's not all kinds of hops. It's as reliable as anything else on the internet. There's no failure probability and latency increase over a traditional website. The other nice thing about that is it makes it really easy to plug Lightning into the web at large. So like with Tor, people would need to use a Tor browser to access your e-commerce site, right? Because your node is behind that. That's not the case with Nostr. It's just JavaScript, JSON, and WebSockets. That's the stuff the web uses anyway. So you can plug an N profile into any website and start passing invoices to that. So what we've done is we've eliminated 90% of the friction of setting up a real Lightning node, not just an app that's really nerfed, so that you can actually start using it to generate revenue and not just cost to tinker with it. Like with Phoenix, you're paying a lot of cost just to tinker with Lightning. You're not benefiting from it in any way. There's an incentive problem. And that's what we're trying to move the needle on, is make it easy to set up a node that actually earns you revenue so you can use it for your business, so you can onboard friends and family, help their businesses get bootstrapped. That's really what Lightning needs to be. And then Nostr, further helps that by plugging it into the web. So if we want Lightning or Bitcoin generally to be the payments rail of the web, we need to treat it accordingly. We need to get it into the web browser, and that's what Nostr allows us to do.
But there are concerns about using the ClearNet because of privacy concerns. So that is only solved by Nostr, or even with ClearNet, you have some levels of privacy?
So really the only thing you're leaking with using ClearNet would be the IP address of, let's say if you're running the Lightning node at your house, your IP address for that node would be, people could see that, even if it changes a lot. They could get an idea of your geography, so they might know the state or maybe the city you're in, potentially. So people mostly use Tor to get around the networking issues. There's other ways to solve that. A VPS, I think, is the best option for most people because they're only a couple dollars a month. They're always online. They're in a data center. So if you're concerned with your IP address leaking, Nostr doesn't solve that. Nostr is doing the communication for the invoices to the web, but your Lightning node underneath will still be communicating with its IP address. So if you're concerned about using your residential IP address to connect to the Lightning network, which I would argue is, you're kind of worrying about the wrong thing because nobody can really get your address from that. The intelligence agencies are going to get it anyway through the ISPs. Tor, you're just getting yourself put on a watch list, right? Because Tor is a Sybil-owned thing by like the CIA anyway. But if you're really concerned about the public getting your home IP address, you can use a VPS. You could do things like a reverse SSH tunnel that doesn't require any software. There's other things like Tailscale and stuff like that. They kind of have some of the complications of Tor in setup. You could also do that with a VPS if you don't want to have your Lightning node on the cloud, but you don't want your IP. You could have your home Lightning node tunnel out through a VPS to mask its IP. You could do a regular VPN. Regular VPN's kind of a standard way you could do that. So there's a lot of ways to deal with the privacy issue. But Tor is not one of them because what's the point of the privacy if your Lightning node doesn't work?